It's your boy Soldier Boy, and I copyrighted claim the Artism podcast.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the show this week. We have a very special guest. We have Martin Sahlin. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, that was surprisingly good, actually.
Oh, thank you. He is, should I say creator of Unravel?
Yeah, that works. I mean, one of them, but
Yeah.
I took the first steps.
Okay. Yeah. I really liked Unravel. It's adorable, and it's very nice and wholesome. I wanted to discuss with you Unravel, and also I think it'd be interesting to briefly talk with you about E3, just like
Okay.
as a whole, because well, we've never had anyone on who's actually been on stage at E3 before.
Yeah, that's
So I let's get the E3 out of the way first, since present the thing. What was that like, going up on E3 to present your game?
it was very satisfying. Thing is, like, people who watch it think I was really nervous, which is actually not entirely true. I was a bit nervous because in the dress rehearsal, my microphone didn't work, and I felt that it would be kind of silly to go up there and not make a sound. But once I figured out that it could actually hear me, then I was pretty chill. It was intense for other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It was there was this guy in the green room before that asked me about, like, he asked me if I was nervous, and I was like, no, I'm actually pretty excited about this. And he said, like, yeah, like, excited to get it out of the way. And I said, like, no, I've been kind of looking forward to this moment for a long time. So I could spend all day up there if they left me. But it was basically like the culmination of a very long and very strange project, because it was a project that was so very deeply personal to me, that I really invested a lot of myself in and spent a lot of time creating. And also in the year leading up to that event, I had a bunch of like really difficult personal stuff happening in my life. So I was kind of like not in a very happy place before. So I was just super looking forward to finally get to show this little jewel that I've been polishing for the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just like a super big deal for me. It was just a huge relief, because it probably sounds arrogant, but it was like I was pretty convinced, I was pretty sure that once we showed it, people would like it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, in the process leading up to that, we have showed it to some people, and everybody had this really strong reaction from it. So I was kind of like pretty confident, actually, strangely enough. So to be able to go up there was just a huge relief and like a major turning point, because I came from like a really dark and bad place, and suddenly you have like thousands of people telling you that your thing is really awesome. So that was really cool.
And when you did go up, the audience reaction, it was extremely positive. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, initially the reaction was like, "Who the hell are you?" it was like really fun to go up there. I don't remember which game was before us. I think it was some Star Wars game or something.
It might have been.
Wasn't it Plants vs. Zombies or something?
That was after.
Oh, right.
That was like the big tonal shift. Like you
Yeah,
have the cute little game about love, and then zombies and dancing and
welcome to the danger zone. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a jarring shift, I think. But it was kind of fun, because like at first people were like really like blank faced and confused, just like, who is this weirdo on stage talking about weird things? But then they sort of warmed up to it, and when we rolled the trailer, everybody was like super excited. And it was cool, because I mean, it was a genuine surprise for pretty much everyone. So I think I think it made an impact.
Oh yeah, it definitely did. I know some people are still talking about it to this day. I have a.
It was kind of funny before, because we were walking around the room. I had some other co-workers from Coldwood with me there, so we were just walking around the hall before the show started. And I was holding the little Yarny doll under my jacket, and it was kind of difficult to get it to stay there. So I dropped it, and one of the marketing guys from EA just kind of jumped on it like a grenade to hide it, so nobody from the crowd could see it.
The big leak. How was it being approached? Because I remember I rewatched the E3 thing, and they said that they approached you. How was it being approached by EA, who's got quite a reputation, I'll say?
It was a very, very positive and cool meeting. We sat down with Patrick Söderlund, and we're kind of expecting to pitch the game to him. But basically, I showed the little level we had, and I talked about the backstory, and then he sort of interrupted me and started this whole pitch about what he wanted EA to become. That, like, for him, it was really important to do, like, creatively and artistically interesting stuff, because I mean, they already have huge successful games. So to him, it was more fun to just do something that he felt really strongly about personally. So he had this long kind of strategy discussion where he talked about the direction he wanted to take things in, and that was just super cool and interesting. And it was just like wild to have that level of support. Like, when you pitch a game to a publisher, you always want to have a champion, like someone on the inside who helps you with the pitch. And it was kind of cool in this case. Like, our champion is like number 2 or 3 in the company, so he has a lot of sway. Like, whatever he says actually does happen. So then suddenly we had this like big behemoth on our side. And I think there was a lot of people within EA who were like really genuinely excited to be working on something like this, something that was so far removed from everything they do in their normal, like, day-to-day operations. So we had huge levels of support. Okay. And I mean, the whole thing eventually, I mean, it's not like we started the Originals program, but I think we inspired the Originals program, because they liked working with us. And I think they obviously saw some PR benefits from it as well. But I think I think the creative intent was definitely genuine. So it's sort of like a win-win for them. They get positive PR, and that they get to do something that they actually like.
Was there ever a bit of a concern of, like, because of EA's, reputation, like, was there ever a concern that people would jump on Unravel and kind of like, oh, it's another EA game or something like that?
Not so much. I think it was I think we figured it was different enough that people wouldn't really consider it an EA game. And I mean, it's not. I mean, it both is and isn't an EA game. Like, we had a lot of support from EA, but it's also like
it's a Coldwood game.
Coldwood's work in the actual game. So I think for the most part we got a really fair treatment for people. Like, people looked at the game for what it was, and they didn't necessarily look at EA. And if anything, I think coming from EA was almost like a plus for us, because it just made us stand out more.
Yeah, I know both Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft they all show off indie games when they're during their press conferences, and I think that was the first indie game that EA had ever shown off at E3. Yeah,
it was. We actually heard that comment from a lot of people, like, that's so weird that you're working with EA. This looks like a Sony game.
Oh yeah. After E3, how did you feel about the public response?
That was completely mind blowing. Because the thing is, like I said, I was feeling feeling kind of confident that people would like it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one thing to say that, and one thing to actually understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like wild when people started like making fan art and like building Yarny dolls, and it was like my phone was melting from notifications in the first couple of days, and it was just so heartwarming to hear all the nice stuff and to see some of the stuff that people wrote to us. There was a funny story about that from after the presentation. We were sitting in the lobby of the hotel where all the EA people were staying, and we were making some extra Yarny dolls because we wanted to have a little photo op in our booth following day. And then they have these they call them conversation managers at
Mm-hmm.
EA. Basically, their job is to track everything that's being said on the internet about their products. So they have all these tools that kind of read all the forums and all the tweets and everything, and try to automatically assess the sentiment, if it's positive or negative. So all their stuff has like a score, or people like it or they don't like it. And it was kind of wild because all of these people were just running around like crazy saying, there's 0% negative sentiment. We've never, ever seen this happen. Like, this is unreal.
Aww.
It's like you turned the entire internet nice.
Oh, that's great. Did you ever like consider selling Yarny dolls with like the limited edition, I guess, or whatever with the game, or at a booth?
They did actually do that, but it was kind of a weird deal. It was exclusive to some store in the US
Really?
only. So it was they do exist, but they're kind of hard to find, I think.
It's okay though, because if you go onto your website, there's still a how-to on how to make them yourself. So
yeah, I've actually noticed there's a bit of an Etsy black market for these as well. I think that's really cool.
Oh my god!
Some people who make them are really, really talented.
Oh, that's nice. So your Unravel, it was you said it was inspired by a camping trip you'd been on?
I mean, yes and no. It was created on this camping trip.
Oh, okay.
The actual inspiration came from a song lyric. It was I don't know, it was a bit of a weird time at the studio because everybody had just been fired. We had another project canceled, so we were all fired. And I was basically going to write. I don't know. It was. Do you censor this show because it was kind of meant to be like my fuck you game because I was kind of pissed off about the state of things. So when I was writing concept, I was like, I'm gonna make one like fuck you game that sort of
I feel
that sort of sets everything right that I thought we were doing wrong, because I felt that we'd been sort of making bad games for a long time. So I wanted to make something that was like meaningful and heartfelt and personal and honest and genuine. So there was this song lyric that popped up in my head. It was a friend of mine who sang at my wedding, sang a cover of a Björk song, which is called Unravel. And there's a line in it that talks about unraveling when you're away from the things that you love. And it just sounded like a character to me. When I heard it, I drew the character almost instantly and felt like, this is perfect. Let's make a game about love where you are a character made of yarn that unravels the farther away it gets from love. So it's a very like hippie concept to begin with. And then I went on this camping trip because I had vacation days left and I didn't want to get fired while I still had unused vacation days. So I wrote a little one-pager and took off and went into the woods camping with my family. And then that little thing that I wrote, it was like a couple of sentences and that image that I draw, which was kind of crude, sort of hit the note with some people, and they wanted to see more. And I said that I'm on vacation, I'm not coming back. But like, if you want something made out of sticks and stones, I can give you that. And that's what I did. I ran around the woods and kind of scavenged materials and built a little Yarny doll and ran around and posted it and took pictures of it and sort of invented the game by playing with the doll in the woods.
So the game is there's no dialogue in it at all. Was that a choice that was a bit concerning? Was it like a concern, like, people won't get it, or the story will be too hard to follow?
Yes, there was definitely a concern, not so much from me, but from others who were a bit worried about it. But I think that with the topics that we wanted to discuss with this game, that's really hard to do in text. Like, you have to be a really good writer to write something meaningful and good about love and longing and, growing old, or, missing pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the beauty of doing it without words is that then people can put their own words to it. They can read in their own experiences and their own thoughts and feelings, and that just makes it a lot better. So I see it as a strength, and I think, we try to communicate things with moods and emotions and with gameplay, and just by looking at the character, like, you can see how the character moves, and that's sort of a very clear image of what the character feels. It's like, I think what I put in the documentation when we were discussing this, I wrote that body language is always on. Like, you're always saying something, whether you want to or not, with your body language. And that's why the character is so simple. It's basically just like a silhouette, because then it's all about posture and body language and gestures. So I think it worked. Also, I don't feel confident that I could write a story that would work as well with words.
You want to end it up with a longing story like Anakin Skywalker in the prequels.
yeah, that would have been awkward.
Originally I had the interpretation that Yarny was like a toy from Toy Story, and he'd come to life because the old lady missed her husband and was just feeling alone and sad, and so he was running around all these places to try and collect those things just for the sole purpose of making her happy again and not making her feel alone.
That is pretty much the story. It's just someone missing all their lost pieces and you trying to tie them back together. And then as for what the specifics of those lost missing pieces are, that's sort of up to the audience. It's kind of, I like that it can mean different things to different people, because they sort of, everyone kind of gets the tone of it, but then the details is sort of based on their own experiences. Like, I had one discussion once with a Chinese woman who told me that she could really relate to this story of being kind of left behind in that little countryside village when everybody else is moving south or moving to the big city, which is like one of the more like subtle themes in the game, but it's there. Because I live in the north of Sweden, and that's like a thing here, that all the smaller towns are getting depopulated and everybody moves to the cities and sort of the countryside dies. And it's definitely not something that we make a big deal of in the game, but it's there, and to her it was like huge because she's from China, and that development is there as well, but in like 100 times the scale. Like, her little village of a couple of hundred people was now like there's a huge city there instead with millions of people in it, and everything has changed. So that was kind of cool. Like, even though we're like half a world apart, she could still find something to relate to in the game. Something that I thought was like uniquely Swedish.
So I'm an animator, and the animations in Unravel, they're amazing. It's so fluid. In most games, when the transition from gameplay to cutscene, usually the character will snap into place, or there will be some kind of like weird looking transition or something. But Unravel, every animation flows into the other so flawlessly and smoothly. How is that accomplished?
Um, yeah, well, thank you, by the way. It was a big focus of ours that the animations were really important because wanted to sell the idea that this is like a real character that really lives and breathes, that you can feel empathy for. So animation was hugely important. But it was largely down to the work of Sam Adu, who is the animator, and Jakob Marklund, who is the coder who does it. Like they have a very good working relationship, and Jacob, who does the coding, is really into procedural animation. So it's like always like a mix of everything going on. So we have tons of different layers, like context sensitive layers, where like there's a bit of physics on the limbs, and there's also like Yarny looks at points of interests, and there's we call them mood zones, where we can swap out any animation in the set for something that's more emotive, like if you're freezing or if it's windy, for instance, you could have a different walk cycle there. And then I guess it's a little bit easier because it's a 2D game. So if you want to go into like a cutscene, you can sort of just walk the character, like force walk the character into where they need to be. But it was like it's a lot of hard work, but also just some clever programming and lots of layers.
Well, it definitely paid off. The game looks beautiful. It flows very nicely.
In that same vein, the music in both games is absolutely fantastic. How closely did you work with the composer to make sure everything was just as perfect as it was?
Very closely. They have their studio literally across the street from ours, so it was quite convenient.
Oh, yeah.
But that was one of my favorite parts. That was actually one of the first like really visible benefits of working with EA. That like suddenly we had a music budget that was just surreal for someone coming from the type of projects that we worked on before. So I was basically a kid in a candy store at that point. So originally we had another composer in mind, but he felt that the project was a little bit more than he could tackle on his own. So then we talked to Henrik and Frida and said, like, here's the style, and here's the story, here's the tone. Is this something you think you could work with? Like, we wanted to make it very inspired by local folk music. And we talked to Henrik at first, and then he found us Frida and said, like, she knows everything about folk music, so we should definitely do this as a team. And from then it was just like sailing. It was really really awesome to see them work, and they brought in really good musicians, and it was just like joyful to watch them do their thing.
Okay.
Fantastic.
What was the hardest part of the development?
I mean, to be honest, the hardest part for me was that a bunch of personal stuff happened towards the end, which was not related to the production at all. But it was basically, I was investing a whole lot of myself into this. Like, it was my baby, and I was pouring my heart and soul into this. And I was pretty close to the point of burnout. And then, yeah, all non-work related stuff happened, which was extremely difficult for me. But by then we were so close to finishing, so it was just kind of like let's see this one out. see how it happens. But if I want to talk about strictly work related stuff, I think the most difficult thing was trying or like knowing when to quit in a way, because everybody felt really strongly about this and wanted it to be amazing, and we all knew that this is our shot at making something that's really beautiful and really cool, and we wanted to shine. But that also means that you work a little bit more than you should probably. So I think that's sort of finding that balance and making sure that the game is representative of what we want it to be, but it doesn't kill us to make it. And I think for the most part of the project, we had pretty good project management. Like we kept things in check. But then towards the end, when we realized that we were kind of running out of time a little bit, then there was quite a lot of very voluntary, but still crunch. And I don't know, I think everybody in the industry agrees that crunch is a pretty horrible and stupid thing. But in this case, it was something that we just, like, nobody was forced to do it, but we all just felt like we want to do more with this.
Oh yeah. Did you see recently that Nintendo has come out in a strong stance against crunch?
Yes, I did see that, and I think that's really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's something that, like, making video games is a job, yes, but it's also something that you can easily kind of like get a little bit too passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you do the crunch like we did, and like nobody told you to do it, but you want to do stuff, so you just go a bit all in. But that's harmful too in the long run. But then there's also like the flip side of that, that sometimes people are told to crunch because other people want to make money off their labor, and that's like a really, 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 really horrible thing.
Oh yeah.
So I think all forms of crunch are bad, but some are even more terrible.
Well, yeah. How do you feel about the sentiment that like, some people like the crunch, and that they say, oh, my best work gets done during crunch period?
I think I'm definitely one of those people who, if I have a deadline, I do like 80% of the work on the last day,
Yeah.
probably. But I think what it's about is that if you look at the workload over time, it needs to be a sensible amount of work. And if you're the type of person that likes to do a lot at once and then just kind of slack for the rest of the time, then that's fine. But any kind of prolonged period of crunch is proven to be ineffective and seriously harmful to people. So it's just, but I'm the kind of person who can kind of work a 2-hour day one day and a 12-hour day the next day. It just depends on whether I'm in the mood. But what's important is that if you look at it over a week or a month, it needs to be sensible amounts of work.
Okay. How big is your studio?
There's 17 people right now. There were 13 of us for the majority of Unravel and 14 towards the end. And then we grew to 17 when we did Unravel 2.
What were some of the unique challenges that came with Unravel 2?
We had a completely different design approach to Unravel 2. It was basically because I was exhausted after the first game, because, as I said, I put a lot of myself into it, and I had a lot of really difficult things happen, and I was also working really hard with marketing the first game, so I was just really tired. So I felt that I don't want to lead the same way on the next game. So I wrote the basic premise that in this game you start off with your bonds cut, but you make a new bond, and you make a new friend, and the game is all about co-op. It's all about building something new instead of clinging to the old. So I wrote some basic design about that, and then from then on, what we did was we tried to do everything by consensus. So we had like a direct democracy where everybody could have a say in anything if they wanted, which was an interesting experiment. I wouldn't say it was good. We did create, I mean, we did create some like really cool gameplay. So in some ways it worked, but in some ways it was also like really stressful for people at the studio, I think. So I can't quite recommend it, honestly. So that was like the big thing, just like the how we set up the production. It was just like a completely different beast towards the first game, just because everybody chipped in on everything. And then also, I guess it's really hard to make a game with two characters that works the same way. Like what you mentioned before about animations and cutscenes and stuff like that. That was super difficult to do with two characters. It was way more work, and took a lot of more trickery.
In the first game, was all of the photography your own?
Most of it, I think, like probably like 85% or something was probably just photos from my own album or photos that I took. Sometimes moved some stuff around, like so I took some things from an old picture and put it in another picture, but it was mostly my own photos. It was actually, it was inspired by that, by the camping thing, because I felt that it was good karma to stay with photos, because photos had worked out so well when I was creating the initial design.
What are your plans for the future with your studio? Is there going to be any more Unravel, or is there going to be new ideas?
It's probably going to be something different. I mean, me personally, I want to make meaningful games. I've been working with video games for almost a little more than 14 years now. And for the most part, we did kind of pointless games. We did skiing games and sled racing games and games that were essentially about nothing, which is fine, I suppose. But if every game is like that, it's not very interesting. And for me personally, I wanted to do something that felt like it gave people something worth keeping, because people invest so much of their time into games. So it only makes sense that games should give something back. And also, I think that games have a pretty unique opportunity to say meaningful things, because the audience listens to video games in a way they don't listen to other forms of arts, because you're so like immersed into it. You're like living that experience, which means that like you can just do more. You can do better, more interesting things. So that's what I'm interested in doing, in trying to just reach out to people and hopefully say something that's meaningful and inspiring and maybe helpful too.
Do you have any any favorite games that do say meaningful things, or
The Fight Lights Out?
No, that's actually the worst game that I've ever touched.
which game?
The Fight Lights Out.
The fighting game that we did with Sony. That was a really horrible thing to work on, because it actually started as my idea, but what we ended up with it's one of the reasons why Unravel was like a fuck you game, because I was so pissed off about how the fight turned out. Because it was what I wanted to make was like a little party game, like a physics toy. Because I was playing a game with some friends, and there was this girl who apologized. We were playing Tekken, and she said like, "I'm sorry, but I get kind of into this. So if I do weird things, like don't get upset or anything." And everybody was just laughed and said like, well, how bad can it be? And then she started playing, and no joke, she was like rolling around on the floor and going wild. And as I was watching this, I figured like you should harness this energy somehow. So then I designed like a little puppet controller that used the 6-axis, which was like new at the time, or it didn't actually exist yet, but it was about to come out. So I wrote like a story about like a little friendly party game about like silly boxing, kind of like Gang Beasts that came out like 10 years later.
Oh,
yeah. And it was just supposed to be like a friendly, charming little, like a happy game. And also I was kind of into martial arts at the time. I was doing a lot of Thai boxing and like stuff like that. And I was like really in awe of how friendly that scene was in Sweden at the time. It was like super respectful, and everybody was just like really mellow and charming and just like nice. So I wanted to make something that felt sort of like that, like cheerful and just silly and friendly and fun. And what we eventually wound up with didn't contain a single thing of what I originally wanted to put in there. Like that, not even that original control method survived. Everything was just like changed along the way. And I was so pissed off about how that turned out. So that's in part of like when we made Unravel, we actually have it in the contract. That it says that we have final say about all creative decisions, or actually I have final say about all creative decisions, because that was just like, that was my ultimatum, that we're only doing this if I get to rule. Like if they turn this into something it was not meant to be, then I want to kill it.
Loot boxes.
But luckily nobody tried to change it. Sorry?
I just said loot boxes.
Yeah. No one has requested any loot boxes. So
but yeah, getting back to my my question from earlier, are there any like games with like like very meaningful games that you love?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think this War of Mine is really good. It's one of those games that I love and hate, because I feel really bad playing it, but I also think like it's quite amazing. And I really like Yarny, because it's one of those games that you could really put in the hands of anyone and they will sort of get it. And they will also probably enjoy it in a deeper way than they would enjoy something more trivial. I'm actually quite excited to see what the new game they're working on, Sky, what that's going to be like.
Okay.
Tested it a little bit, but I can't say for sure yet what I feel about it.
I'm sure Max is sick of me bringing it up constantly, but have you ever heard of Spec Ops: The Line?
I haven't played it, but yes, I know the premise. It's the sandy one, right?
Yeah, it's the sandy one.
Yeah. No, I've heard it. I've had the twist ruined for me, but I think maybe I should play it just to see if it's as good as they say. Because I hear it's interesting.
Oh yeah, that's
how did you like it?
I love it. It's one of my top 10 games, like ever. But speaking about Spec Ops: The Line, I saw a tweet you made recently that there's about there being so many like negative games, I guess. That like there are so many dark and gritty games, but there's not a lot of happier games, I guess.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that?
I mean, there are happy games as well, but I just think that maybe the games that we focus on tend to be sort of either the really dark and gritty or the very like trivial ones. I think that's the problem with a lot of the happy games, is that they tend to be a little bit ignored because people write them off as harmless. They're just like, oh, they're happy and cheerful and they're not going to offend anyone and they're just that people don't take them as seriously. But I think what I want is it's actually coming back to Björk again. I went to see one of her shows and last summer, and she had this message about utopias, which is basically if we never try to imagine the future we want, we are going to end up living in the future we fear. Because, I mean, we focus all our attention on the dystopias and the terrible, horrible nightmare, shitscapes of the future. But nobody ever tries to imagine what they actually want the world to be. And, I mean, that's where ideas come from, trying to imagine what we want instead. And I think there's a lot of room for games to just, try to imagine better futures instead of just, more dystopias.
I mean, I guess for video games, it'd be a lot harder to make a game about a utopia because a lot of games they need to have that loop with and usually that's a combat loop, and you're not going to get a combat loop in a happy society, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's really true, and I think a lot of the traditional loops are kind of a little bit destructive or stressful in that way, but there is also a lot of interesting research and interesting development happening in that area of just trying to create more friendly loops instead of focusing on fight or flight. We can focus on the other response, which is tend and befriend. And instead, I have a friend who does a lot of research about this and tries to create games about this. She has a company called True Love, which is making really interesting things.
I did hear that Cyberpunk 2077 actually has an option where you don't have to kill a single person in the game.
Yeah, it does sound like that. The only issue then is it fun to do that?
Oh yeah, true.
Because that's a game that I've played a lot recently. I played an awful lot of Red Dead Redemption, but mostly playing it wishing that it was something that it's not, because you can see all these opportunities in it. How it is this really immersive and really fantastic world that you just kind of want to hang out in, but then your only means of interacting with that world is to shoot at it, and it just feels like there should be more ways to do things here. Simple things like having a conversation, stuff like that, which is where I think AI, for instance, could be very interesting a couple of years down the line, where maybe we don't have to be locked down to pre-recorded static dialogue, but you could actually perhaps maybe communicate more intelligently with game characters. So you wouldn't have to play as a mute in every game. I think that's actually quite telling for the state of games, that in 90% of them you're a mute. I guess Yarny is a mute too, but then nobody speaks in the games.
I'd be really interested in seeing there are so many. We're getting so close to emulating human speech through chatbots, I guess. Microsoft put out that Tay AI a while ago that was meant to emulate it, and before the internet ruined that, it was actually pretty good. We're getting close to that, and if they can get voice emulation down, then it'd be really interested to see if you can have a game with all generated dialogue, and how would that work? Each AI has its own personality, and they genuinely react to what you're saying or doing.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's one of those things where I think we're not there yet, but it's it feels plausible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that will go the way you want it to, though, because you had the game Facade that came out a long time ago now, and that game's big thing was, hey, you can type anything you want, and the characters will react to it, and they'll react to it appropriately. And it was meant to be an interactive drama, but you try and look it up, and it's just people typing piss words and calling the characters derogatory names, and them kicking you out their house.
Or saying the word melon.
Yeah,
But
yeah, basically.
hold on, Matt. The difference between Facade, though, in this kind of game would be Facade was all pre-recorded dialogue. Facade was all just responses that had been
S
made
yeah,
beforehand.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is we're gonna get Facade on crack, basically.
Oh,
It will
no,
happen.
I'm saying like imagine Red Dead Redemption, right? But you can just kind of talk to them. But I don't know
Yeah,
if
and
you use the
imagine a
same. If
final
you
scene where you're trying to confront one of the cowboys. No spoiler alert. And instead of it being real emotional, the guy you're playing as just says melon over and over and over. Like it's not gonna go that good.
he just says stuff like poopy or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there's still quirks to work out in that kind of field.
Like
But
people will
Yeah, I
really
think
play it, but I'm just saying that's going to be a knock-on effect.
it'd be fun. I think it'd be interesting.
probably. But I think, I mean, obviously, there's still some way to go. Like for instance, I mean, you can have AI they can create sentences that work, but they don't really have any kind of sense of context yet. But that's just like when you identify the problem areas, you can kind of solve them, and the evolution is happening so fast. So I still think it's like, I don't know, give it 5 years or something, then maybe.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing holding it back is synthesized voices, because right now I don't think I've ever seen a synthesized voice that sounds like anything but a synthesized voice. It all sounds very awkward.
There was that university that basically made a Joe Rogan deepfake voice out of purely clips from the podcast. That thing was really impressive.
Oh yeah,
I
and
think
there's that thing, Max, that we did where I put my voice into an AI, and I made my own chatbot out of it, I guess.
Was it awesome?
No, it sounded terrible. But I mean, yeah, as soon as we get synthesized voices, I can see that being a thing, and where the AI can each, have their own personality traits attached to it, and this sounds like a Peter Molyneux game.
A little bit, yes. I don't think it's not gonna replace the mainstream for a while, but I think it's like an interesting area to explore.
I wouldn't want it to. I don't want to put voice actors out of work. Those fellas work hard.
But that was actually kind of fun. I was talking to a guy who records a lot of voice actors, and he basically verified something that I suspected, because we haven't done a lot of voice in our game, so I didn't really know much about the process. But he said that, like, for a good sized game, I probably shouldn't name drop what he's been working on, but it was kind of a lot. Is like there's so much dialogue to record that there's no time for actors to rehearse the roles or actually like know what they're saying. So they have to kind of work intuitively. So they get some kind of context. They get to know what the room looks like. They get to know the distance to the characters that they're talking to, but they don't actually get to rehearse their lines much, because they usually always go with the first take, because they feel like the first take is the most spontaneous and the most like intuitive, and sometimes it's nonsense because they have misunderstood the context and they say something that just doesn't work when you hear it in context. So it's actually not that far removed from AI generated stuff, because there's actors who just like they don't know what they're doing.
Okay. This one is the last question I have relating to E3 at all. But how has E3 affected you? How has that whole experience affected you?
It's been really cool because I got to go out and travel a lot and go to a lot of other events and meet a lot of people. So I've made a lot of friends around the world, and that's kind of cool. It's always really fun to go to events like GDC and stuff when you get to meet all these people and just reconnect. So you can have a reunion with everyone. Okay. So that's like the biggest thing, like the most measurable thing, like lots of friends. And I guess also like it's a little bit easier to pitch weird ideas when people have seen it work. So So that's also a plus.
Okay. Max, you have a few questions, right? Written down?
Well, I just had one other question. I wanted to ask about your hand tattoos, because your hand tattoo story, because I thought it looked pretty cool. I wanted to ask if there's any story behind it.
Yes, but it's kind of like probably not the story that people hope for, but it's like I was sharing a flat with a bunch of friends at the time, and a friend of mine had a tattoo on his fingers, and he was basically just teasing me about it and saying like, "Oh, you could never do it. You're too weak. You could never handle it." So it's like it's a combination of male ego and wanting to impress girls, and also having like a big crush on Madonna. So I was like, oh wow, hand tattoos, those are cool. I want to do those. So it was kind of a weird experience actually to sit there. I think I was 18 at the time, and I was kind of like a skinny vegan straight edge kid rolling into this tattoo place, manned by some big burly bikers in their like late 40s. And I was like, hey, I want to make some North African Mendi tattoos, which was not really something that they were familiar with. So the interesting thing is that the tattoo doesn't actually look like what I told him to make. It was just like I gave him a description, I showed him a picture, and he just kind of went for it. And then as he started, I figured, let's see where this goes. So it's kind of crude, but fun.
Do you ever regret it?
No, absolutely not. I love it. I think it's really good. The only thing, I used to make tattoos myself later on, and the only thing is like I'm always really careful to mention to people like that I didn't make this one myself, because if you look at it closely, you can see it's not actually like a technical masterpiece. It looks quite crude, but no, I like it, and I think I like it more because it turned out not quite the way I designed it. Because then it sort of feels like it was this is what the universe chose, and I like that side of it. And I also I liked the follow up story to making the tattoo though, because I didn't tell the people I was sharing a flat with that I was going to do it, in case I would chicken out and decide that I shouldn't. But after I'd done it, the tattoo artist, I mean, he couldn't put a bandage on it because it's on my hand. So what he did was he took a surgical glove and just filled that glove with some kind of cream, and taped that glove on my hand. And for the first like 8 hours or so, tattoos always bleed a little bit, and they tend to bleed out a little bit of color. So like I went to bed and got up and took the glove off, threw it in the trash, and went about my day. And then my flatmate comes home and finds this sticky, messy, bloody, black smeared glove in the trash. And I was like, what the fuck did you do? What have you done? And where's the corpse?
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, we're approaching the hour mark, I guess, of our thing. Just a few more things. Do you still have the was the Yarny you showed on stage? Was that like the original that you made on that camping trip?
The one that I showed on stage was the second one that I made.
Oh, okay.
Because the original one is a bit fragile, because I made it from wire, like this steel thread that I peeled off an anchor wire, a rusty anchor wire to an old boat, and I bent that into like a little skeleton that I wrapped in yarn that I borrowed from someone. So
you say
so
borrow.
I did actually borrow. It was
You gave it
the
back?
weirdest thing because I was like out in the woods and we were camping, and next to us, like a little ways away from us, there was this this kid, this punk rock kid, sitting out there in the sun in his tent with like leather jacket and knitting, with red yarn. And at the time, I was like, "Come on, this is ridiculous! Like, I need yarn, and I find this." That was the point where I know that like whatever I do today is going to work. This is like my liquid luck moment. It's just like I cannot fail today because I just ran into a punk rock kid who had the yarn that I needed to finish my little Yarny doll. And this is just like the universe wants me to make this game. So
Do you still have both the original and the one you showed at E3?
yes, I do.
That's great.
So there's there's going to be a show this summer at the Swedish Institute for Architecture and Design, I think they're called, and they want to borrow the original doll. So we've just finished writing the paperwork for this. So I'm going to have some kind of company that specializes in art, in moving art around, to come and package it and move it. So that's going to be fun.
Are you a bit like protective of it? Like make sure you don't.
Yeah, I mean
break
it's a bit fragile because I've had. It looks like something you want to play with, and since I've been posting it quite a lot and taking a lot of pictures with it, it's kind of weak in the joints. So I've had people do that, like, "Oh, there's Yarny, can I?" And then they break the arm, and I have to work to put it back.
All right. Well, Max, if you don't have any questions, I'll deliver the last one.
I don't have a question so much as a funny anecdote, which is it's so funny that you say that Unraveled is a fuck you game, because I think one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done on here was with a fella named Kevin MacLeod who's made a lot. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this, don't you, Jared?
I do.
Yeah, he's made a majority of the royalty-free music online, and a very fantastic quote he dropped on us was that good creativity comes from a place deep in your heart called hatred.
I can totally relate to that.
He's right. No one we've had on has ever contested that point. Even the maker of this really wholesome game.
You made this like fantastic wholesome game about love because your boxing game was like hijacked by like corporations.
Pretty much, yes. Actually, I mean, I gave a talk about this like 2 weeks ago, which was called. I think the title for the talk was "Anger is a Gift," which is basically just like how this very lovely game was all fueled by rage.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, I'll ask the final thing. So if you had any like advice or anything you'd want to say to like any aspiring game developers or anyone who's got like creative passions that, you know, maybe not motivated to go fully through with them, like what would your advice to those people be?
Start small. That's like, I think, like, do small things that you can finish. It's a lot more satisfying than trying some big beast that you're never going to finish. So like whatever your creative passion is, like make it manageable and then build on that if you feel like you have the energy. But do small things. That's more fun.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us on our small little podcast.
Thank you.
It's been a great time. And I hope you have a good one.
Yeah, it was fun.